Okay, what about now? Oh my gosh, I like literally had it turned off. Are you kidding me? Well, I guess all that being said, thanks for just hanging out while I was like blabbing for nothing. Okay, just verifying, can y'all hear me now? Yes? No? I'm gonna go with yes, and hopefully someone says that that is true. Oh, bless. Okay. Okay. I'm connected to OBS Studio. I don't know how many of y'all are actually knowing live stream stuff. And I'm actually using a camera right now, a real camera, I know y'all. But it's hard. Okay, fabulous. Let's actually talk about the submitted questions then. And then if you have questions that you want me to answer, make sure that you are throwing that into the chat so that I can answer them. Anyway, I guess what I was saying before was just welcome to the live stream. I'm so happy that you're here. And I love talking about this stuff because this is my passion and my hyper focus. So literally, it makes me so happy to get questions. You are doing me a service to ask me things. So without further ado, let's go through the current submitted questions and we'll talk through other questions as throw them in there. So, alternatives to medication or micronutrients that support focus. Okay, yes, there are so many different types of alternatives to medication for ADHD. And honestly, I don't have medication yet myself. So the ways that I support ADHD that are supported in the literature is nutrition, therapy, and then also exercise. There are specific nutrition things we can do. I'll talk about that in a sec. But the exercise aspect, super interestingly, cognitively enhancing types of exercise are the best. So specifically, acrobatics / gymnastics is really good for ADHD and helping with the improving focus over time. Rock climbing is another really good one. Dancing, that's a great one. Judo, jiu-jitsu, super interesting. So basically anything that makes you think while you move your body. That is going to be some of the best things for you. And then therapy obviously is going to help because it's good for us. But then nutrition-wise, this is obviously my expertise. So let's just chat about it really quick. Video is lagging audio. Oh my gosh. That is a good thing to know. That's annoying. If anyone knows how to fix that, that'd be great. I bet I can figure that out. While I try to figure that out, let me try to multitask. And so with eating with ADHD, we need to think of multiple things at the same time, but also make it not super. The biggest thing that I think people make complex with eating with ADHD is how we just don't actually need to worry about it too much. A lot of us think about food too much and that makes it more complicated. So the biggest thing here is actually taking the pressure off. Seriously, that's the biggest thing. And the other biggest thing is just making your plate not complicated. So we want to have about 1/3 to 2/3, about 1/3 of it protein, and then about 1/6 of it the starch slash, so like think your regular carbohydrates, your rice, things like that. And then for the other half of our plate, we want it to have fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, things like that. That is the ideal ADHD plate that's going to help your focus the most. So, yeah, that is the biggest thing to know with just generally how can we eat for ADHD. I'd say just in general, that's the biggest thing. Making sure your plate is good. Not good, just like focused. And if you go onto I have like some posts on YouTube. I have a specific, here's an ADHD plate to follow if you're more of a visual person. So just check that out after this and that'll help. Anyway, that being said, for other things with nutrition that support focus, some specific nutrients are very important for just brain health, which in general can help with our focus. And those are antioxidants. So antioxidants are found in our fruits, our vegetables, beans, basically all the plants have that. And that does include foods like coffee. So your coffee has a lot of amazing antioxidants in it. And that's another reason why I'm happy to say, yes, go drink your coffee. Just don't drink a ton of it. So, great. That is just kind of the overview. And then how can one master cooking efficiently without losing focus or motivation? Lately, they've only been eating wave and frozen foods. I completely resound with this. And I'm sure almost every single person with ADHD is going to resound with that as well. And the reason for this is mainly just our executive dysfunction. Let's think about it. So when we think about eating, it's not just eating, it is going out to buy the groceries. So we have to plan. That takes up a lot of our executive functioning. And then it's not just doing that, it's putting it away in the pantry and the fridge. And then it's also thinking of the specific foods that you want to make. It is so complicated. And then you actually have to make the food, and then you have to eat the food, and then you have to put the food away. And it's just, it all compounds, and it's not the same for a neurotypical. For them, it's just kind of all one experience. For us, it is multiple steps. So my biggest takeaway for me when I was trying to figure out how can I just get better at cooking, it was figure out what spots am I specifically lacking in. So what spots are the ones that I hate, that I am just not doing good with. And for me, honestly, that is the grocery part. And so I'm very grateful that I have a partner who is very supportive, and he's the one who actually helps us get out to the grocery. We together plan our meals for the week. And we also only plan 3 meals a week. That's the other thing, making sure that we can have it very, very realistic. Because I know for a lot of us, we think, you know what, I can make 5 to 7 meals a week. And no, maybe you could. But realistically, is that actually going to happen? Probably not. So we have 3 meals that we actually cook every week that we are excited about. And then the rest of our meals, honestly, either we get frozen meals. Ideally, we try to go for the types of frozen meals that have more fruits and vegetables in them. So say pot stickers, we like to have a lot of pot stickers. And then leftovers. We make huge batches of soup. That's a great thing. But yeah, that is, I'd say, the most helpful thing for how do you actually be interested in cooking and eating. Figure out what is actually the hard part for you. See if you can outsource it. I know it's not possible for everyone, but then if you can outsource it, so say you get a box that comes to you every single week that has your meals planned for you, that helps. Remembering that ADHD at its core, unfortunately, for a lot of us, is a disability, especially when it comes to food. And the best way to help you operate in the world is through accepting that you are allowed to have accommodations. You're allowed to get the foods that are already pre-chopped up. You're allowed to subscribe to a meal service. And those small things can actually make a huge difference in the long run because then we're not getting takeout all the time. So I guess those are my biggest things. If anyone has any other suggestions, obviously feel free to throw that in the comments. Hello, every single one of you. Princess of the Web. And then Hit Me With Music and Andrew Ferguson. Hello, all of y'all who are specifically here and who have. So that is the first question. Second question, thoughts on the OMAD? Been doing it unintentionally since starting meds and don't want to harm my body or metabolic rate, but it's so hard to eat more when my appetite has changed dramatically. Okay, so quick acronym for y'all who don't know, OMAD is 1 meal a day. And I bet a lot of y'all do this. I used to do it. And honestly, based on the research, this is one of the worst things we can do for you. I hate to say it, but yeah, intermittent fasting / only 1 meal a day is not good for our ADHD. So there's a few reasons for this. The biggest reason is that our brains use glucose differently than the general population. So we use it about 8% less effectively, which is not great for don't eat throughout your day. So when we see reductions in glucose metabolism in the brain, the first nutritional change that we want to make is eating regular. We'll talk about the keto diet in a little bit here, but the first intervention we want to do is just eating regularly. What that means is actually making sure you're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, potentially snacks in there. So that is one like neurological reason why we don't want to do that. The other reason why is because when we only eat one meal a day, it can actually make us eat a lot more at one time during that one meal of the day. And unfortunately, binging food can decrease our receptor sensitivity to dopamine. So this is actually really interesting because we have research with obesity that finds that people with obesity have reduced receptor sensitivity to dopamine, which then essentially it kind of makes eating addictive. Very interesting. And obviously, when we can't respond to dopamine in our brains very well, then yeah, it's not going to be very good for our ADHD for obvious reasons. So, those are the big things that I want you to just think about as you think about eating. The other aspect here is that, yeah, unfortunately, ADHD medication, even though it is amazing, comes with that side effect of it can be an appetite suppressant that is honestly horrible because for a lot of us, myself included, I already don't have a lot of hunger signals and I don't feel like I need to eat. And so if I were to go on a stimulant, that's going to be even harder. Oh my goodness. The main thing that is usually helpful from just what I've talked to with people is making sure that you're eating something before you or medication. That, yeah, especially something protein based. Super interestingly, we don't have any research that says protein with before you eat your no, you don't eat your medication. But yeah, protein before your medication, technically we don't have any research that helps. We do have research that says fat before your medication can help your efficacy of your medication though. So super interesting. We just haven't studied protein yet. Hopefully we will soon. But there's the theory that it helps. So anyway, that was a side tangent. But yes, making sure that we're eating ideal. If you're only eating one meal a day, let's just try to figure out where can you start adding a meal. And it doesn't have to be a big meal. It can just be a super small meal too, right? Like we don't have to have these huge meals. Just something to help our brain get a little bit of energy. And then it will decrease any of that binging behavior that we get at the end of the day. All right, so that is question number. Hit with music. Yes, batch prepping a few pounds of chicken thighs or beef in the Instant Pot and then freezing half cook for lazy you. I love that. I need to get myself an Instant Pot. My mom, her heart, she has an Instant Pot and she's been trying to get me get one, but my husband does not love unnecessary kitchen gadgets. So I don't know. Maybe I'll send him that comment and be like, you know what? This person said that it's really great. I will say here, super fun fact, protein is one of the best things that we can eat for ADHD. If you were here before, I talked about the plate for ADHD and how we want to make sure at least a third of our plate is protein. And the reason for that is because protein is the building blocks to our neurotransmitters, and also a lot of our brain has a lot of protein in it. So yeah, protein's very important. Pairing protein with carbohydrates is even more important because when we pair protein with carbohydrates, it helps those amino acids cross our blood-brain barrier and turn into our serotonin, our dopamine. It's super interesting, and that is why the balanced plate, ideal. I just know that the why is super helpful because once we understand the why, it's so much easier to do the do. All right, so question number 3, interested in ADHD inattentive and low carb, high fat diet in conjunction with perimenopause. All right, so low carb, high fat diet is really close to the keto diet, which we'll be talking about in a little bit here as well. And honestly, for inattentive and perimenopause and low carb, high fat diet, there's not a lot of research at all actually out there on that specific interaction. I will say that a lot of women tend to feel a little bit better on a higher fat diet, especially during perimenopause. But we want to make sure that we are consuming the more appropriate types of fat. So the better fat that we're going to be consuming comes from nuts and seeds. And then also dairy products tend to have a lot of the more helpful fat. Um, yeah, that's the biggest thing here, focusing more on the more helpful fat and less on just extra carbs. The other thing here is that is the ADHD plate. It's also the ideal plate for every single person eating, pretty much. So the ideal ADHD plate, again, is just 1/6 of our plate is carbohydrates that are not fruits and vegetables. So think your rice or your pasta. And honestly, that is very different from what a lot of us do. So a lot of us just have a ton of pasta and a little bit of protein and barely any fruits and vegetables. That's not what we're looking for. So yes, I would say if you are looking to do more of a low carbohydrate diet, please, please do not reduce your fruit and vegetable intake. Fruit and vegetable intake is one of the most important aspects of our diet, besides the and the nuts. So if you just take anything out of this, focus on your protein, add a lot of nuts, seeds, beans, vegetables. Those are basically the things that have been shown to help ADHD for sure. All right. Can low-fat diets make you feel more ADHD symptoms? I'm on a low saturated fat diet for cholesterol levels and want to know how that might affect ADHD. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the high fat. We'll get into keto in a little bit. Could low fat make it have more ADHD symptoms? It kind of depends on who you are, honestly. So if you're a person who is consuming not a lot of fat in general, it could, because our brain is primarily fat. Again, like it has a lot of water, it has a lot of protein, but it's mainly fat. So when we are not consuming enough fat, then basically it's like you're just not giving it its ideal food, essentially. Okay? I mean, its ideal food is carbohydrates, but like fat is also ideal for it. But again, it kind of comes down to what type of fat and where are you getting your fat from? Because we do not want to go low fat for the nuts and seeds and beans. Like those are really important fats, especially specifically those nuts and seeds, especially avocado. That's like one of the best fats out there. But if we're talking about reducing more of those saturated fats, so say you're like buying a ice cream or something like that, ice cream totally fine, but is if we're consuming it way too much, that has too much saturated fat in it. So in general, in the literature, we see that people with ADHD do consume a lot more saturated fat than the general population. And that is typically correlated with worse heart problems overall, which kind of makes sense because ADHD is also correlated with having more cardiovascular issues, also correlated with more diabetes 2 risk. And same thing with ADHD. So again, the thing here is we don't want to reduce all fat in general because that could negatively impact you. But potentially, depending on your risk factors, reducing saturated fats could be, yeah, focusing on the healthy fats, avocado oil, olive oil, canola oil is actually a healthy fat here too. Your nuts and seeds, your peanut butter, your pepita butter, pumpkin seeds. Oh my goodness, that is like one of the best seeds for us. I could probably talk about pumpkin seeds for at least 5 minutes. I won't. We're gonna get through the rest of these. Oh, and then always remember, if you have questions, throw them in the chat so I can make sure to talk about that. Okay, what are the guidelines for proper amounts of protein for people with ADHD? I love this question because I think protein is one of the best things for ADHD. I know I talked about that. Actually, I think like all the foods are super important, but a lot of people just don't eat enough protein. And it can make us feel so much better. If you're like a weightlifter listening to this, you probably don't need to hear what I'm going to say, but for the rest of y'all, ideally, we are consuming for ADHD specifically between 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Not per pound. So if you are in the States listening, not that. That would be way too much. You don't want to have 1.2 to 1.6 grams per pound. Much for our bodies. I believe the conversion ratio here is if you multiply your body weight in pounds by 5, but I could be wrong. It might be kind of 454. I'm pretty sure it's times 0.55. Go Google it. But for say like a 125-pound person, or I think that's like 50 kilos. The conversion rate is so confusing sometimes. But around there, it's about about 90 to 100 grams of protein a day, which is kind of hard for a lot of us, right? So like for me, I have a hard time getting to that. And the easiest way to do it for me is protein shakes. Gotta be honest. Like, yeah, protein shakes are really helpful. I think of it as an accessibility thing, right? If it is going to accommodate me, it's okay to buy, right? It is going to help my ADHD. Therefore, it's like in my brain, like I can logically say I can have it. So, and then just in general, eating your protein in the morning can help. But just back to the guidelines, 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Figure it out for yourself. If you have difficulties getting to that, that's fine. Start with a general guideline of 0.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. That is a lot more doable. It is not for ideal functioning, but it's for basic functioning. So if you're not even hitting that, just focus on the smallest thing you can, right? We're not here to make huge changes. If you don't eat any vegetables, I'm not going to say, hey, go start eating the recommended 4 to 5 servings of vegetables a day. I'm going to say, hey, start off with one vegetable. Or if vegetables are like super scary for you, start off with fruit. Honestly, like fruit is so good for us. So those are my thoughts on that. All right. I'm going to quick go into the comments here. What about high fructose fruits that kick you out of ketosis / large insulin spikes? Hard to separate the benefit of antioxidants from the preferential fat / BHB metabolism. All right. So this is going to be a hard question to answer before I answer keto. So actually, let me answer the keto one first, and then we'll get into that. So keto and ADHD. Super interestingly, we have 0 human that, right? We do have 2 ongoing studies now that probably won't get results for another. So what we can do is understand what is the current rat / rodent studies and other behavioral studies in general. We can look at some observational research, and then we can also look at just general research with adjacent research with keto. And so what we find is for specifically rat models of ADHD, we find that the ketogenic diet can actually help with making the gut microbiome go closer to a homeostasis. However, if we do it too longer, they found that it like actually can make it worse. So here we have potentially it could help our microbiome in the short term. Doing it too long could harm it. So that is the first thing, gut microbiome stuff. The reason why it could impact the gut microbiome negatively is because fiber is the preferred source of food for our gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome for ADHD, very interesting. Do an actual dive into it. I have a newsletter on it a long time ago, but yeah, it's really interesting. But basically, at the end of the day, our microbiome is very important. It's really important for not just mood, but also for our immune system. And people with ADHD tend to have overactive immune systems, as well as we tend to have just more immune responses than the general population. Why we also see our oxidative stress isn't the greatest. And that's another aspect. So with the ketogenic diet in human studies, we find that when we do it for too long, our oxidative stress can actually increase. And since we know that people with ADHD already have increased oxidative stress, not good, right? However, at the same time, short term, it can decrease oxidative stress. So there's just a really interesting interaction here of doing it short term possibly could help, doing it long term, no, could make it actually worse. So there was another rat study that had them do a ketogenic diet, and what they found was initially it could help, and then 8 weeks of it actually made their ADHD presentations worse. So again, it's just a rat study. We don't have anything in humans yet. We will be getting that hopefully in the next year or two. I already see some interesting compounds and biases in those two studies, which is going to be really interesting when they come out, but I'll be sure to cover them when they finally do. So overall, that is the general consensus with the research on keto and ADHD. It potentially can help in the short term, just like resetting like your microbiome. It can potentially reset and make your brain feel a little bit better for the short term. But then we want to make sure that we are reincorporating the foods that are going to be important for our body and longevity. So doing the ketogenic diet long term is actually a stress on our body. When we think about the food that we eat, the carbohydrates are our body's preferred source of fuel. I'm sure you have heard that probably somewhere. Now there's this really funny meme of like, your brain needs carbs or your brain needs glucose. And that is true. That is our brain's preferred source. So think of it as throwing some gas into your car that initially makes it feel like it's going better, but then it's for some reason there was this, I don't know, this oil in it that was like very small, and then it accumulated by like giving that specific gas for too long, and then it actually kind of breaks down your car. So it's a similar thing. It could help in the short term. It can make it much worse. And that kind of goes again with, I don't know if all y'all have seen my video on neuroplasticity and food. There's one food that can help neuroplasticity, and that's polyphenols. And that comes in antioxidants, which is basically, again, your fruits, your vegetables, your nuts, your beans. It always comes down to those 5 areas, honestly. And when we're cutting out all of that, essentially the brain is going to start to be like, what the heck is going on? I'm not able to produce as much neuroplasticity as possible. So those are the biggest things here. So going back to the high fructose fruits that kick you out of ketosis / give you large insulin spikes. Here, it's really important to understand your personal experience of the fruits themselves. So for a lot of people, they don't need to actually manage their spikes because honestly, it isn't important for them. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of people out there who are selling some continuous glucose monitors to us. And honestly, the only thing that they are doing for the majority of people is increasing their stress, which then is actually going to make a lot of their life worse. And that's why I don't, unless you are actually pre-diabetic or have diabetes, like, it's just not necessary for us. There are some things that are helpful to know that high glycemic index foods could actually make us feel like our ADHD is getting a little bit worse in the short term. And too much dysregulation of our insulin over time can potentially make our ADHD symptoms worse. So the biggest thing here is that fruits also contain fiber. They also contain a lot of antioxidants, and all of those negate the high insulin spikes. That's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this. If you consume, say, like just some rice by itself, that's going to give you, like the white rice, that's going to give you the large insulin spike and then the large decrease. especially if you're not pairing it with a protein source or a fat source. However, for fruit, it's a little bit different because we have to add in the fact that there are antioxidants, that there is fiber, that there are other important nutrients like magnesium that can actually help our response to the insulin. B6 is another really important thing here. And so it's just kind of complicated. If you're worried about it, just make sure you're eating it with a protein source. But otherwise, it's actually really important to eat our fruits. You can also opt for lower glycemic index fruits, but it's not super necessary. That is just kind of an overview of the research there. If you have more questions on that, let me know and I can try to answer it as I go here. So question 7, keto feels very unobtainable for my current diet. I just love potato rice too much. I also love potatoes. If I want to emulate part of the health benefits, would it be better for me to focus on reducing sugars and carbs, increasing protein or fats, or would it be worthless if I won't? So this kind of just piggybacks on that question earlier about like what is the research. So honestly, maybe it could help if you do it for 6 weeks. It can be hard for a lot of people with ADHD because it is a very intense diet and it can make it feel not super good for the first 2 weeks. And I don't know, when things don't feel good for us, we tend to not do it, right? So for your current diet, if you really enjoy those carbohydrates, those like more starchy carbohydrates, again, I would just encourage you to notice your plate. Is it 1/6 of your plate being those rice and potatoes? If it's more than that, then maybe we want to focus on reducing your carbohydrates, specifically like those starchy carbohydrates. Then we can look at your protein intake. Are you actually consuming enough protein? If you're not, then maybe we should just focus on increasing protein. In general, again, the dietary guidelines we have for a reason, and the reason is because it has been researched the most. And it has been shown to help ADHD the most as well. There was a 2023 study that looked at essentially following the dietary guidelines for ADHD, and it was 50% of the people who follow the dietary guidelines were actually experiencing 30% reduction in their symptoms. So, which is incredible, right? And it doesn't feel like it's that much of a big deal because, oh, it just means I have to eat a few more fruits and vegetables, or I just had to focus more on fiber. My biggest advice here is start with the basics. Once you get the basics down, do that for 2 months. And then after you do that for 2 months, we can talk about going on the keto diet because we want to make sure we have an actual real baseline before we do something more extreme. So like take an elimination diet, for example. If we don't have a good baseline, if we're not actually following the dietary guidelines, how do we know for sure that it's actually helping us? We don't. And that's why it's super important. And I think that's another reason why a lot of people feel like the keto diet is helping them because they haven't done the baseline first. And so that like big change can make them feel better a little bit. But in the long term, again, it's going to harm us if we do it too long. And then B, like we need the baseline. We need to have an actual understanding of where we are at. Plus, they might not need to do it. Diet first. Yeah, super interesting stuff. Does attempting a keto diet make sense for people who don't consume animal products? Honestly, it's very hard, I would say, if you are trying to do the keto diet and not consuming animal products. It's also just hard in general for people with ADHD to be vegetarian or vegan, simply because it takes a lot of execution to complete that. I am working on eventually getting us a like more of a vegan style. How do you eat for ADHD if you're a vegan? Because a lot of my content is based in being an omnivore because that's just the easiest thing for ADHD, right? But it's not everybody's path. And so, yeah, I'd say that one's really hard. It's going to take a lot more executive functioning. honestly, and you might not feel super great doing it, but everything's your choice. You're allowed to do what you want to try. I would always recommend you work with a registered dietitian if you are going to do a ketogenic diet, because there are a lot of things that could go wrong. And then also, if you are more vegan or vegetarian, there's a lot of nutrient deficiencies that will happen if you aren't very careful about it. And then obviously there's the nutrient of fiber that you can't really control at all if you're doing a keto diet. Fiber is so important. My gosh, I just want to share a win with you from one of my Patreon members here really quick. So in my Patreon, I have a huge list, or not a huge list. I have I think it's like a 30-page document. I don't remember how long it is, about the ideal ADHD diet. And then like one of the recommendations here are figuring out your fiber intake, counting plants, things like that. And yeah, the person came back to me and they're saying that they have been working on increasing fiber and they have noticed significant improvements in their ADHD symptoms. And I just really wanted to share that win with you because, I mean, fiber isn't super sexy, right? Like, it's our fruits and vegetables and our nuts and beans and grains. Like, not exciting. The ketogenic diet sounds exciting, but it's taking away all the fiber. So, yeah, I just want to encourage all of you here just to start with increasing fiber. If that doesn't help, talk to a dietitian, potentially try the ketogenic diet, but then definitely move back to the more dietary guidelines. Yeah. So, that all being said, I'm just reading here. I lean more Mediterranean, low carb, high fiber, healthy fats. Well, you are doing pretty much exactly what the guidelines say for ADHD. So congratulations, you figured it out. Heck yeah, proud of you. Oh, yeah. The most important thing you wrote there is long-term versus short-term. Stress on the body, very, very important. So when we think about the ketogenic diet, it is actually the body. The body does not prefer to use, doesn't. Like, it prefers to use glucose. So it can help in the short term because it can kind of reset our body. I would not recommend doing it more than 6 weeks at a time. And I would not recommend doing it more than a year. But it could help. But doing it too long will make your body stressed. And our bodies are already more stressed than normal than like the neurotypical bodies. So yes, we want that we're not overstressed. If stress on your body is something that you struggle with, in my Patreon, I also have another ebook. I have a lot of ebooks in there, but it's on nervous system regulation and how you can actually use and understand it to help your ADHD. I have a bunch, I think it's over 50 nervous system regulation skills in there as well that I use only as like, yeah. So be sure to just check that. All of these links are in my bio. All right. Are there any nutritional ways to target executive dysfunction short term? Fantastic question. Okay. I love this one because obviously a lot of us have short term memory issues. Our working memory is not the greatest. I honestly almost forgot that I was going to do this today. And then I remembered 2 minutes before, and then I had to set it all up in 2 minutes, and it was time. Okay, but foods that can actually help with our short-term memory. When we think about that, we want to think about foods that support brain function. So the most important foods that support brain function are healthy fats. A lot of the healthy fats from specifically EPA and DHA, but mainly EPA omega-3s. And a lot of that comes from fatty fish. So that is one of the most important things here for brain health and memory. Another one is antioxidants. So we talked about that a little bit with how antioxidants are super important for neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity essentially is how our brain makes connections with each other, and that includes our memory. So antioxidants, one of the most important antioxidants that has been connected with improving specifically short-term memory is, let's see, what is it called? Anthocyanin. It comes in blueberries, so that is one of my top 5 foods for ADHD. Blueberries. I consume blueberries almost every single day. I do not buy the fresh ones because that is expensive. I go to Aldi because that's also inexpensive. But I always get their like 1 pound of blueberries for $3.99, and it is great. Would recommend. And I have that in my morning smoothie, or I'll have it with my Greek yogurt in the morning with a wonderful granola that I love. So, yes, those are some of the most important things, our healthy omega-3 fats as well as our antioxidant-rich foods. Super easy to think about antioxidant-rich foods as, I mean, you probably are going to memorize this by now, nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, and beans. Best sources. You can also get a lot of them through our drinks. So coffee, those are all great sources of antioxidants. Super interestingly, coffee has been associated with reducing dementia risk, which is, connected to memory. And then it also is associated with increasing dementia risk if we coffee. So don't drink too much coffee. That is about 400 milligrams of coffee a day. So the sweet spot here is about 120 to 250 milligrams a day, which is like 2 cups of coffee. I personally like it because it makes me feel jittery. So, but you go follow your heart. All right. What foods can be a quick source, not sugar, to get back into the rhythm in case you feel off track of your day? Well, my first suggestion would have been sugar. I like to use sugar as a tool. I do not advocate for us to consume a lot of sugar, but sugar with ADHD is very interesting. Use it as a tool to kind of push through any executive dysfunctions. So, yeah, that's one thing to know. Not over consuming sugar, but we can use it as a tool. But if you don't want to use sugar as a tool, totally get it, because sugar is connected with inflammation, and especially if you are a person who's a lot of sugar or just in general consuming a lot of added sugar. That was also me. Oh my gosh, so I lived in Paris for summer, and I basically took sugar packets and just like did shots of sugar through them. That was a different time in my life. Now I have control over my sugar cravings, and the reason for that is because I eat 3 meals a day. I usually eat 3 meals a day, and then I also am very, very cognizant of when I am feeling like more burned out. So that's another thing to remember. It's not just what can I eat to get back into the rhythm in case we're getting off track in our day. It is what is actually getting us off track. Did you actually eat lunch? A lot of us don't eat our lunch. A lot of us skip our breakfast. That's the first thing, right? The other thing is, what are my stress levels? Am I actually doing too much? Because a lot of us with ADHD have very bad interoception, which is essentially our ability to understand what is going on in our brain and our body. So you probably, I don't know. I did a short on this a little bit ago about just the fact that it feels like I can do anything. And that's one of the hardest things in life, because my brain is like, you know what? I am so able to sew my wedding dress in a week or something like that. And no, no neurotypical thinks that. And so we tend to overbook ourselves, we tend to overwork ourselves, but it doesn't feel like we're overworking ourselves, because in our brains, it's like, no, we're not doing anything extra. Like, that's super easy. And I find myself doing that all the time. I still don't have a good grasp on this. I wish I did, but I'm just going to say I don't. Still feels like I'm not doing enough. And yet here I am, like, doing a ton of things at the same time that I probably need to just scale back on. But what it is. So, all right. What foods can be oh wait, I talked about that. Omegas for ADHD. You're vegan, but keep reading about the kinds from fatty fish that are much better. All right, so this is a super fun question, because what we see with supplementation in ADHD with omega-3s, I know you probably heard differently, but that is so the reason why a lot of people with in the general medical community recommend omega-3 supplements for ADHD is because there has been a lot of research connecting omega-3s with ADHD. However, recent research, which we always want to look at the most recent research and the most recent meta-analyses. So the two most recent meta-analyses came out in 2024, and it's just incredible because they didn't know that they were studying the same thing. They both came out in 24, and they both found the same result, which is all the literature says currently omega-3 supplementation doesn't actually help ADHD. Now, I will say that if you are a vegan and you're not eating fish, potentially could help, right? Mainly because we might be a little bit more deficient in that. But statistically, probably not going to do much. There is some really interesting things about omega-3s and ADHD that, for example, we see that people with ADHD tend to metabolize our omega-3s differently than the general population. So that actually indicates that maybe we should be more fatty fish than the general population, or just in general consuming more nuts and seeds, because those contain the most like omega-3s. I mean, there's a bunch of different omega-3s. The omega-3s from the fish and some omega-3s from algae, they actually contain the ones for our brain. The nuts and seeds, those contain the omega-3s for our body, but they can convert to the omega-3s for our brain. It's not super efficient, but it does work enough, especially if you're vegan and you're eating plenty of nuts and seeds. So I guess that's the biggest thing here. Just focus on your nuts and seeds and maybe trial not taking a supplement for a little bit. See if it was actually helping you. And if it wasn't, probably wasn't. I don't know. I'm just an advocate for not taking more things than you need. There's also some issues with omega-3 supplements and inducing more oxidative stress based on how they were produced. So, that might also be why currently we don't see that omega-3s, the supplements, are helping ADHD, because the negatives from the specific types of supplements are outweighing the positives that it could potentially have on our bodies. So, I don't know. I always recommend just consuming the fish if possible. But I get it if you're not. If you're a vegan. If you're a vegan, just focus. I think my camera is about to die for some reason. Oh my gosh. Hopefully I can get through all this. Okay. Let's just do number 12 last. Is there such thing as a dopamine-rich food, or is that just clickbait nutrition advice? Well, let me tell you. A lot of it's clickbait. That means that there are things we can do to improve our dopamine production with food. Most of it is just eating consistently throughout our day. That's the biggest thing that's going to help your ADHD nutrition, food, and production. The other thing is that we could, if we pair our proteins with carbohydrates, improve our dopamine production in our brain as well. So those are the two main things. It's less of like what types of food and more of like how do we eat our food. So, oh my gosh, and there we are. I'm going to, I guess that's kind of it. You can't see my face anymore, but I really appreciate all of you for being here and for listening and watching. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And next week, we will just be doing this again. And I'm every single one of you. I have a Discord if you're curious and want to join. I don't know. It's very fun. It's free. Go into the link in my bio. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.